today's session will be anywhere between 30-45 minutes. If you have something to do at the end of our session at the bottom of the hour, feel free to drop off. I am recording this, and I'll be happy to share the recording with yourself, and perhaps you can share with some colleagues afterwards. I am Miguel Adao. I'm the Vice President of Marketing here at Voler Systems. I've been here 4 months, having the time of my life, getting to know several of you, and hope to meet many others in the coming weeks and months to come. But yeah, let's go ahead and get rolling here, and people will just merge into traffic as they arrive. But fantastic opportunity for us to talk about a topic that's near and dear to our hearts at Voler, near and dear to Brian's heart as well at NowSecure, and perhaps relevant to, well, certainly in some way relevant to your worlds as well. Otherwise, you wouldn't dedicate some of your time to joining us. So thank you for that. We're going to talk a little bit about mobile health, and it's post-pandemic especially. There's just this explosion of remote patient monitoring and telehealth and mHealth and IoTM, whatever the IoT terminology is for medical, Internet of Things. And so let me give you the floor, Brian, to introduce yourself and to walk us through just two slides for you, 2 slides for me, and then we can get started with the conversation.
Sure. This is I'm Brian Reed. I'm excited to be here today. I'm a mobile guy for a whole lot of years. You might remember that thing called a BlackBerry that a lot of us carried. So I cut my teeth on first generation mobile. Actually, before that, I did stuff with the Windows side of Microsoft, but we'll bury that. And I've been in mobile for a long time. NowSecure. I often work with customers on strategy, mobile implementations, best practices for application security, all kinds of stuff. And we're kind of a mobile pure play. You may or may not know who NowSecure is, but we actually founded through a government activity back when the iPhone and the Android devices were created, and the US federal government was trying to figure out what to do with Android and iOS. And so we helped build out forensics, and then that led in mobile pen testing, which in turn led into tools and training and all kinds of stuff that we do today. So we're kind of a pure shop. All we do is mobile app security. And work with lots of organizations you can see here. A lot of the big guys. We help Apple, Google, and Microsoft, and smaller folks. And the healthcare sector, be it healthcare payment provider, delivery, technology, health tech space, is about 25 or 30% of our business. So we're happy to be here today to help you all with some strategies. And then a little bit of data, kind of what's going on in the world. So we do annual benchmark reports. It's really cool to see how mobile's evolved. Many of you here may be producing healthcare technology that relies on mobile applications. Clearly, that's the thing that's always with the point of patient and a patient delivery setting, whether they're remote in their house, sitting in their car, or traveling on an airplane, or
they left me out 4 minutes of this thing. Whatever.
Hey, Joanne, maybe you can go on. Thank you. But in all of that, we've actually been benchmarking the App Store. So we have a giant engine that crawls the 6 million apps in the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store, and we found some pretty scary data. About 85% of all the apps in the App Store break the OWASP standards for mobile security. About 70% of the apps leak private data that, if someone wanted to litigate it, would violate GDPR and CCPA. Huge amount of supply chain attacks. And what's also very interesting is that tampering is a frequent attacker or hacker approach in terms of tampering with mobile applications or things they connect to. And we find right out of the box, about 32% or a third of all apps in the App Store are exposed to tampering, which is a bad thing. Obviously, you don't want someone tampering with an app that you build. So we share a little bit of data here just to give you some perspectives, and we can share benchmark details with you in the background. The good news is everybody's using mobile more. The good news is a lot of companies do the right thing. The bad news is not enough do. So we're happy to be here with Voler to help you with your strategies for securing mobility. So more specifically, we have been slicing into industry verticals, and on our mobile risk tracker website that you can get to, it's got about 500 to 600 healthcare and health tech oriented applications, specifically in the healthcare segment. And you can compare different industries and how they perform. Of the 590-ish applications we've analyzed, 95% of them have some sort of insecure data transmission. About 2/3 of them have insecure storage. Just under half of them have some sort of configuration like permissions that actually could expose another app to stealing data from your app. And about 10% of them, called 8% of them, could actually be taken over by a nefarious actor if they know what they're doing. And so we try to bring some visibility to this to help you understand where to focus your activity. On the next slide, just simply NowSecure can help you. We've got a full suite of solutions: security testing, pen testing, advisory work, and so on and so forth, that we can bring into your organization if you want to try to help you out, working with you and Voler on your strategies. So appreciate the little chance to get a little introduction. Happy to talk about any of the data we've found or how we work in healthcare on the go forward. Thanks, Miguel.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate that. I also have just a couple of quick slides. Let me move. I have all kinds of boxes open. I just realized I didn't set up automatic admittance into the webinar, so apologies if you have to wait a couple of minutes. So I'm tracking that as people come in. I'm admitting one by one. Next time I'll learn to just allow everybody to come in as they wish. But yeah, Voler, many of you know our primary markets are wearable devices, medical devices. We do some consumer work, Internet of Things, everything, smart cities, smart cars, smart buildings, all the sensor stuff. So a lot of wireless and low power and motion control and firmware and FPGAs, microprocessor work. And so basically, really just two slides from me here, but this is how we work. We can help you in phase one in terms of the specs, the architecture, ideation stage. We can then help move you to phase two in terms of the hardware, the firmware, the software, the electrical pieces, all the components of your proof of concept or the prototype. And then we can help. We don't manufacture anything per se, but we can help connect with contract manufacturers of your choice or partners that we know to then also do all the debugging and testing and certification. And essentially that's what Voler has been doing since Walt founded this company several decades ago. But yeah, let's talk about this mobile health. That's it for the prepared slides for today. Let's really have a conversation and allow Brian and Walt to really kind of take us into a little bit of a discussion. By all means, feel free to drop any questions into the chat box. That's one of the boxes I have open, is to also track if you have any questions. You can either chime in or, a bit better yet, maybe drop it in the chat and I'll be sure to include it in our dialogue here. But I mean, we can start in so many different places, Brian, but let's just ask you. I mean, even this morning, you and I were talking about some cybersecurity threat that was front page news in some publication. Tell us a little bit about, from your standpoint of privacy and connectivity and security and cyber, how do you see this mobile health space evolving?
Well, I think it's a super exciting space. I'm like a walking IoT guy. I have an Aura Health ring that I'm wearing. I have an Apple Watch that I'm wearing. I have to exercise a lot. I have body monitoring because I'm a diabetic. I also have Hashimoto's. And so I'm not exactly the healthiest human walking the planet. And I realize I'm sharing all my PHI in front of all of you. So I have a little bit of a personal interest in the space. I did some interesting things in the healthcare setting around Google Glass a long time ago, when Google Glass was a thing, when we were looking at sort of the surgical scenarios of, if a surgeon was wearing Google Glass and all the diagnostics were available in the glass, while they got their two hands buried in the patient, or if guidance on how to complete a surgical task or whatever could be used. And that's been interesting as well. I think where we are today is that I'm super excited that COVID has actually driven, if there is anything good about it, has driven remote healthcare in a lot of dramatic ways, right? So patient care and patient delivery has been advanced dramatically in the last few years. I'm an advisor in a company that's getting started that is working on dealing with children who have binge purge challenges, and trying to combine technology and therapeutics to help these mostly girls who are trying to grow up, deal with their food disorders and their eating disorders. And some of that's being brought on by the sensors they're wearing on their body, where the sensors are able to basically alert before a cycle happens, right? And try to intervene beforehand. So the ability now to monitor the body with sensors and have intelligence walking around in the pocket or in the cloud or both I think are really stellar, things that are really continuing to move, patient care and healthcare overall. They also create a whole new series of attack vectors that hospital systems and healthcare providers never imagined. And certainly our government hasn't either.
Yeah, I agree with you that the remote patient monitoring suddenly went from something that was unusual to a standard very quickly during the pandemic, because people had to be monitored without going to the doctor. And wearable devices, remote devices, have a lot of security issues. So yeah, we deal a lot with that.
And so, yeah, as we think about this space, very often, both in your conversation, I'm sure, Brian, as our own conversation, especially with smaller organizations that perhaps have some limited funding, et cetera. How do you justify to your management that you want to invest? And perhaps, sorry, we have a little bit of an echo here. You want to invest in some protections to make sure you protect your mobile health data and processes and connections and patients.
Yeah, that's something that comes up a lot with small companies. A startup has limited funding. They want to use that money to get something to market, and extra things like security are a lower priority. Now, I can understand if you don't have the money, but you can just barely get something out there. But if you can afford to put some security in, it increases the value of your company. What often happens, typically happens, when a large company buys a small company, they go through a period of maybe a year of redesigning the product, during which time they may have even taken it off the market. And security is one of the big issues that they have to deal with. So if you reduce that time, you increase the value of your company.
Hey, Walt, can I jump in here and ask a question?
Go ahead.
Absolutely, yeah. Hi, Paul.
Sorry, I jumped in.
Yeah, good. This is what we want. Some interaction. So thanks for breaking the ice, Paul.
It's either for you, Walt, or Brian. So I'm involved deeply, right, in product development. We're a registered FDA contract manufacturer. We do not, Walt, go address what you just said, right, which is the security in a product with the embedded software and things like that. Question to you is over here: are there standards yet? Remote patient monitoring, things like that, are becoming so standard. But are there standards and compliance requirements set by the FDA, like you would have class 1 or class 2 medical device products, but from a security standpoint for the embedded software?
Great question. Miguel, put up the slide that I've got. I was ready to talk about this.
Okay.
So the FDA does not have requirements. They have guidance. A guidance document is not truly required, but you have to pay attention to it. You can't just ignore it. And basically and by the way, this is the guidance that was proposed in 2018 and is still proposed. The actual guidance that applies today is still from 2014. I expect, and they're not greatly different, but I like to talk about the more recent one. I expect soon this will go into effect. So these are the basic things that the FDA requires. First is to prevent unauthorized use. This is basically using passwords. Second is ensure trusted content. So to maintain code data and execution integrity, a lot of this has to do with encryption. You encrypt the data before you send it. It gets more complicated than that. And then maintain confidentiality. Now, they're not worried about HIPAA. They don't care about whether the data gets out unless it affects the safety of the patient. So if losing that confidentiality affects the safety, that's part of what they're concerned about. Now, they recognize that there is no such thing as perfect security. Even the best devices can be hacked. And you need to be able to detect that there's been a hack or cybersecurity threat. And then you need to be able to contain it. Part of what this involves is devices can have a list of their capabilities. And, during the manufacturing of a device for years, every device will be slightly different, or some of the devices. So each device knows exactly what it can do. And when that changes, it's able to recognize it. And then you need to be able to recover from a hacking. And that's typically doing over-the-air updates for a device that's connected wirelessly. And it's very important that the over-the-air updates can only be done by the right person. So if you haven't done a good job of the trusted content and code execution, then somebody could put in their own code and take over the device. But these are the basics of what the FDA recommends. And guidance documents, although not required, they're very close to being required. You'll have to explain why you didn't do it if you don't do these.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Walt. Because, it's like you said, if you had a lot of money, that's not a good business driver / decision making parameter to get a compliant product out of the market, right? And medical devices, because I see this, I have a lot of clients coming to me. They're like, oh, we're just getting past prototyping, and because we do product assembly, US-based product assembly, so I can protect IP and stuff. And then invariably we got to go back. They've got to like, oh, hang on a sec, we haven't done this. Oh, we haven't done that. We're not ready. And there's a lot of back and forth and wasted time for them because they don't know all the different T's they got to cross and dots the I's they got to dot, So this is definitely something of value.
I can understand why a startup may not do this carefully because they have other bigger issues. But when it comes to larger companies, they're paranoid about cybersecurity.
Yeah. Sure.
We've got a big company they're concerned about devices that never leave the hospital and that somebody might hack them with knowledge. It's not even connected to anything, but if you had knowledge about the device, you could open it up physically and hack it. That's getting a little bit beyond what you should be worried about, but they worry about things like that.
Really good. And William asked a good question. So are there other mega trends besides security? Of course, there are many others. And this was just one of them. I'll stop sharing here for a second, Walt. But yeah, maybe back to you, Brian. So you were mentioning sensors in your chat answer to William's question. Maybe talk a little bit about sensors from your angle.
Yeah, I mean, so my comment about the sensors are really related to, there's the primary set that's what's embedded in the phones already. Right. So you've got accelerometers and motion things like, if you fall, the emergency line can be called in your phone. If an Apple phone, iPhone detects your motion. You've probably seen there's kinds of applications that maybe won't let you do something if it detects you're in a moving car for liability. So there's a set of sensors in the phone. Then there's the set of sensors in the wearables and the other things around you. So the Apple Watch, the Oura Health Ring, the diabetic meter, all those kinds of things, right? So what we're seeing is more and more people are trying to take advantage of the existing commercially available sensor technology that's already in the market, right? So the new Apple Watch that just shipped a few weeks ago now has a temperature sensor on it, right? So if you are doing something where maybe temperature is a data element that you feel you need to collect, or monitor, well, now the Apple Watch has that, so you can make use of an existing sensor that was out there. I happen to be in the early adopter program, the sort of pre-beta program for the Oura Health Ring, which is why I'm still wearing it, because I had one for a few years, and that was right before COVID hit, and right as COVID was coming in. And I had it in part because the Apple Watch couldn't measure my temperature, but now it can. So I think there's the creating your own sensors, but there's also the myriad of sensors that are now out there in the commercial market, where we're seeing people build new functionality on top of the commercial tech that's there. And what's nice about that is you don't have to invest in building the sensor technology and going through the manufacturing process necessarily. You might be able to ride on the back of something else, whether it's a Fitbit or a Ring or a body sensor, a watch, all those kinds of things. So that's kind of what I was leaning into on that sensor side.
Yeah, I've seen something similar. There are, like the Apple Watch, it adds features. Why should you develop your own watch if you can get one that already has the sensors that you need? And then there are companies that are developing devices that are wearable devices for medical use that are open where you can modify the firmware, and if it's got the sensors that you need, and some of them will even add sensors for you, you can do whatever you want with the firmware. So you've got a great deal of flexibility.
What about perhaps we can talk a little bit, Walt, based on your experience as well, the whole kind of the wireless connectivity aspect of now this remote interaction between provider and patient, et cetera. What can we say about that?
Well, the wireless side is an area that's been changing rapidly. Most wearable devices use Bluetooth LE, and they can transmit a few feet, 10, 20 feet. And they typically transmit to a phone, and the phone connects to the internet. Well, there are applications where you don't have a phone. You may be elderly, you may be exercising, and we now have the ability to go directly to the internet using technologies such as NB-IoT or LTE-M. These are low data rate, long distance communication at low power. So this, I think we're going to see more and more of this, where you don't have to have a phone in order to get your data to the internet.
Yeah, I would agree. I think I'll add in 5G and all the things going on around 5G. We're doing a lot of work with AT&T and Verizon on all kinds of different things that are sort of sensor driven that are piggybacking on 5G because of their low bandwidth, high density, high distribution side of the house too. I think we're going to see some more innovations coming there. Kind of as the world evolves. BLE in and of itself is a really interesting space. There's some interesting exploits that have been found and discovered over the years, tooling for testing it and all the rest. One of my security researchers is guilty of one of them when we were working on a project for a client. Guilty of finding them. Good, we found it. Good, it got fixed. But one of the things that I'll just bring up is that in our experience, whether you're using BLE or you're going over Wi-Fi, you've got carrier connectivity, a lot of developers don't understand how to properly authenticate and manage an encrypted connection between the endpoints. And if you remember the chart I showed you earlier, the number one most frequent vulnerability we find in a mobile app in healthcare is over unencrypted network connections. And so if you're building a short list of what to do right, make sure that your development team, when they're building something around mobile, understands how to properly authenticate a user or a thing to a thing, and make sure they know how to properly encrypt data transmission between the thing and the thing. Because that's a really easy attack point with sniffing data straight out of the air, whether it's over BLE, whether it's over one of the more modern technologies, or all the way through to the carrier level. In our cookbook for developers, that's the first thing we do, is make sure they understand how to do secure connectivity.
You mentioned 5G, and 5G has a lot of cool capabilities. When it comes to low power devices like wearables, what 5G is using is actually LTE-M and NB-IoT. So they haven't yet created something new for 5G for the low power. But actually, even though LTE-M and NB-IoT are part of 4G, it took a while to get them distributed in enough cell sites that you could actually use them. So it's only been a year or two since they've been available to more than 90% of the population. So there's still a relatively new technology as far as actually having devices out in the field. And I think for the low power devices, that's what we're going to see for 5G. Now, if you've got a phone, you've got more power capability, and 5G offers a lot of other things.
Yeah, let me, this is Rajesh, just chiming in. Hi, everybody.
Hey, Rajesh.
Yeah, so we're working on a dialysis machine and doing the security around that. And they had a lot of time. This is a portable version. They had a lot of time just trying to set it up with the Wi-Fi of the home user and trying to connect it. And 50% of the time, they spent more time just establishing the connectivity and the remote access to the clinician. You can believe that, okay? And then they went to, as soon as they went this is 4G. As soon as they went to 4G, all the problems. It's as if you just set your machine up and you just start working.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just operational right from start.
Well, so it's like a cell phone. You don't expect to have set up a cell phone when you move to another city.
Yeah.
And 5G, for an engineer, it's pretty straightforward. For your average user, it's complex. And the LTE and NB-IoT don't have this problem as well. They're part of 4G.
Yeah.
So that's a way for a very low power device to be set up and used without the complex setup of Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask Kurt Ward actually to chime in. Hi, Kurt. I'm glad you could join us. And you dropped some interesting comments in the chat room. Do you mind speaking to that a little bit?
Sure. Earlier on, we were talking about security, and so I just sent my 2 cents on it. You know, as working in startups, when I know Walt's acknowledged that you can't work on everything, and so you prioritize what you can. But the issue of not facing security early on begs a question about if you really understand marketability of your product when you're talking about medical devices. Because data and software security are like right up there with functionality of your software. So if your software doesn't work, well, the other stuff doesn't matter. But if your software works and you don't address security right behind it, that means you don't really understand marketability of your product. And from an investor standpoint, it begged the question of, gee, do you really understand what you're doing? Because you can't say that your product is marketable in a medical industry unless you've addressed the issues of security from the industry that you're going into, whether it be HIPAA, FDA, whatever the case might be. So that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, very good point. And it's interesting that for a consumer product, security is not a big issue because, number one, people don't buy a product because it has better security. And number two, even if you had better security, how would you tell someone that your security is better than the competition so that they would understand it? So now with a medical device where the FDA is involved, you do have a way of showing that you've met. In fact, if you haven't met it, you're going to have trouble getting approval to sell it. So yeah, medical is definitely different.
Yeah, thought or two for folks in doing advisory work for early stage companies, independent of like what I'm doing here with NowSecure, for example, is because I've been doing security for long enough. You know, security is a cost. It's just part of the business. You're going to have AWS costs because you have cloud compute. You're going to have developer hardware software costs because you need to set up your developers with infrastructure. You might be building software using GitHub or some other development tools. Security should be baked in as a cost of delivery of part of the strategy. In the same way you have a designer who's going to design a phenomenal user experience or a physical object, you should have a security architect or advisor or somebody who's making you sure there's at least some basic security in there. And I know it can be hard to do that, right? I mean, one of the things I learned at BlackBerry was that it was all about security was the foundation of the business, and we were kind of obsessed with it, as you might expect. But when you view security as a feature of the product, just like you view the user experience, and it's a feature of quality, that can help people start to rationalize how to look at it and how to make it part of the overall experience. Of course, there's the regulatory side, but there is the damage to business and the investability side. I have seen startups fail to get funded to the next level beyond angel because they couldn't pass basic security requirements, or they couldn't guarantee trust or address privacy issues that a given market might have. And so we've got to figure out how to make it. It's not that you have to have perfect everything, but that amount of time you spend handcrafting that fantastic screen or that really cool, body attached device, you should spend at least a little bit of that on making sure you're doing a little bit of security the right way.
Yeah.
And I just want to add a comment that, this is not a big hill to climb like in the past, because there are a lot of tools that as you develop your software, you can test for hardness of your application from a security standpoint, and you build it in as you go. And so you have a, sorry about that. Hold on.
We didn't hear anything. It's fine, Kurt.
Okay. And
Zoom
you
is a
have,
way of filtering out background noises, so it's good.
okay. So you have a higher level functionality in your software that has built-in security. So Brian put a nice little formula in there, which he said security plus functionality equals quality. And I agree with that. And then that in turn equals marketability, or addressing market, total available market if you have security built into your system. So
Yeah, and NowSecure does that testing to help you ensure your product is secure.
yeah, I mean, my point is in the old days, people had to do a lot of testing. The tools weren't there. The tools are now there to make it easy to test security along the way, fill those holes and gaps along the way as you build your code, test it, verify it, look at backwards compatibility if you have to, and it's all there. So there's a lot of nice tools out there that help you do that and give you, from an FDA standpoint, show the development of the software across time. Because when you come to market with the FDA, you have to show all the previous revisions and plans, iterations and how you got there. So depending on the product.
Very good.
And if I may, going down this path of the economics and how you do it, just to give you order of magnitude with the kind of things Kurt's talking about. So, and there's questions in here about, how much security costs. So think of it this way. There's now automated security tools that your developers and your testing teams can use that'll cost you maybe $1,000 a month, $12,000 a year on a per application basis that will help you groom in or graft in that security throughout the life cycle. Now, if you're spending $500,000 to get to your prototype, you've got $2 million as your Series A investment round to go to market, $1,000 a month is not a lot of money.
Yeah.
And all of that's automated, right? So the vendors who produce software like this are in a volume game, not a per unit cost. It's about a volume game. And there's open source tooling that's cheaper, but then means you need to throw labor at it, so you're still going to spend the money. So the economics have shifted. Now, depending on what you're building, you still may need some human expertise to either design or test it, because some things aren't automatable. But imagine a world where 80 or 90% of your security is automated, and then you have a little bit that's manual, and that's where your plus costs run. So those are some things to kind of think about as you try to model the economics.
Excellent point. Excellent point, Brian. The corner cases still require the kind of human engineering talent to look at what I call viable corner cases, not every freaking corner case that you can think of that isn't in the realm of possibility, but in the realm of possibilities for your product and your market. Looking at those corner cases does take human engineering, and that's in, as you coined it, the plus. But I just want to, I can't believe how many times I've been in startup companies where the engineering organization is not using the discipline tools of an automated process for testing, validating software and security. They're not being there. And if you're an entrepreneur and you're starting something up and you don't have a software engineering team that's using the discipline in these tools, then you got the wrong team. You got to get somebody on board. And I'm going to put a plug in. There's two ways to get them on board. Go find somebody or go to Voler. Okay, Voler's done this over and over. I don't work for Voler, but you're buying into many years of experience. There are other people like Voler. I think Brian's probably one of them as well. But buying that kind of expertise to help your engineering team come up to speed with it is just incredibly important. It'll help you shorten your time to market, reduce your total cost. I'm out.
And we did not ask you, Kurt, to do this. This was not rehearsed. So thanks for that comment. I'm just seeing here, and we're doing well. We've only lost a couple people in the last half hour. We'll just stick around for 10, 15 more minutes. Greg Jackson, good to see you. Great suggestion on the chat. Yeah, we'll come back. I'll circle back with Walt and Brian, maybe get some input from the likes of Kurt and Paul as well. But I think it's a great idea to have 10 tips for entrepreneurs in the medtech space on how to really kind of embrace this kind of the security, and not just security, but how to scale, how to grow, how to be successful. So I'll take your challenge, Greg, and I'll come back to everybody with our joint 10 tips for
Miguel. There was so many beautiful, amazing tips shared, and you guys know, and Walt knows, I've been a big fan of you guys for. I don't know if it goes back. I don't go back decades with you, Walt, but I do go back 2011 or 12 with a project, and great to see you guys still up and running, doing good stuff. Yeah, but there was so many great tips shared here. If you want to put something together and then share it back to the rest of us,
package it up.
I could learn from it.
Great suggestion. Thank goodness we're recording this. I'll transcribe it and I'll get the biggest nuggets. So Brian,
I wanted to ask something from what Walt said about COVID accelerating things.
Yeah.
Because I work in digital health, digital therapeutics, and large devices as well. And in our, I shouldn't say our industry, it's all about industries. But in my circles, I've been hearing that what was thought that would take 3 to 5 or 10 years for getting approval and attention and funding happened in about a year or two. So there's no one's right or wrong about this, but there were plays, especially in digital therapeutics, to replace digital therapeutics. Originally was being touted by the pharmaceutical industry and the life science industries. They're going to support the pharmaceutical industry. These devices are going to help people stay on drugs and take more drugs and diagnose more drugs. And I'm in medtech for 39 years. We absolutely need drugs in medtech, but we also need lifestyle prevention. We need lifestyle support. People aren't eating right. People aren't exercising regularly. People are overweight. I'm like, I need my app. I need my drug. I need my this and that. I'm like, well, yes and no. Yes, you do if you don't take control of your life, and no if you don't take control of your life. So, but the world changed. Brian, I know you're like the biggest user of all these, and God bless you and all the technologies for having this. Whereas digital technology and therapeutics were being touted and supported by the pharmaceutical industry to support their drug use and promotion, it's changed now, where companies said, I can't put out something that's going to compete with the pharmaceutical device because they're going to take us down or whatever they're going to do. I know that's not true, but I'm sorry, it's also being recorded. But now companies that said, I have a technology that can augment drugs, or I have a technology that can replace drugs, those people are getting approval. Those people moving forward, those people have CPT codes, and that was not, quote unquote, in the cards prior to this whole COVID situation. Sorry, that's my little spiel.
No, thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Brian, I'm curious your take on that, being thank God alive thanks to all this kind of stuff.
Well, I think I'll go back to the company that I'm advising that's doing the food disorder scenario, and they were going down sort of a more traditional medical device therapeutics model. And basically pivoted into commercial technology everywhere they possibly could, and they're just layering in app and some services over it. And in listening to what they've been trying to go through with the process, that's an area where a pharmaceutical company isn't paying attention to that disease at all. Right? There's not a lot of medical studies on childhood eating disorders and adult eating disorders and all the rest. Right? All the money goes to cancer and things like that these days on the research. So what this is actually allowing is a little bit of democratization and the ability for niche markets to develop, right, around a number of these different areas, that maybe have edge cases that the larger, more conglomerate-oriented, healthcare organizations aren't tackling now. And like many other marketplaces, outside of healthcare, it's disintermediation, right? It's allowing more smaller slivers of, I'll call it medical services to be created in a lot of different ways. And, part of what we were trying to do with Google Glass was say, could Google Glass be a generalized platform upon which you could build many kinds of new services and experiences? But a lot of the world was looking at it as like, hey, it's this cool thing. I can walk around and have a computer on my face, right? And the reality was that if you sort of think about certain jobs where your hands, both of them are used in an activity to do some intense activity, is where something like Google Glass works. So a surgeon, a mechanic, right? We work with Boeing on, the guys who manufacture airplanes on the production line, places like that. Forget the consumer parts. And that's why I think what's really great about this is a lot of people are now looking at, hey, I've got all this infrastructure with an Apple Watch and a phone and a delivery system and everything else. How do I build some kind of service on top of that to solve some health problem? And that's where I think there's a lot of this great innovation potential going on.
I wanted to add one thing regarding even consumer products with security. The federal government now requires some security, and their guidelines are similar to the FDA. So if you're making a device that the government is going to buy, you need to have security. And this is going to make a lot of products get security that currently don't have a need. And this is only a few months or a year old. So I think we're going to see better security as a result.
Sure. I would like to propose two things now. I'd like to ask Brian to maybe just bring us home, and just any final thoughts, Brian, that you may have that we didn't cover as our special guest today. I'd appreciate that. And then I welcome folks to, if you wish, to stick around. We're going to do a quick round robin of introductions, because that's one of the features of this meetup community that Walt has instituted over the years that I'd like to continue, is give folks, only if you want, stick around and just introduce yourself. You don't have to turn on your camera, what you do, or perhaps others can help. I mean, we have 25 folks, soon it'll be 20, but we have a few folks that might be able to help you. So let's do that in a second. But Brian, perhaps to set this kind of divider as we wrap up the formal portion of our webinar, any other final thoughts from your side?
Well, thanks for having me along here. You can tell I've got a personal passion along with just the overall market. I think mobile is cool, and I've been stuck in it since the days of BlackBerry. So thank all of you for doing these kinds of health innovations that help people like me and others live better lives, right? And so, please keep trying to do that. Again, we've talked here about how a lot of walls have now been broken down, to give us some more opportunities. I think the trick here, like any business, is there are pros and cons and investment choices you're going to make, and risks, that you have to choose. You have economic risk in your business, you have security risk in your business, you have government regulatory risk potentially in your business. So you need to figure out how to balance all of those. But the fact that you're looking at things like this, the most important thing is consider what security means, and then make smart choices about it. Don't ignore it and hope you can clean it up later, right? Because that's where you get in trouble. I shared a couple things in the chat, and I'm always happy to do follow-ups with anybody. I'm going to drop one more thing in. You'll notice this thing that looks like a wasp behind me over my shoulder. That stands for OWASP. And we do a lot of work with OWASP. And OWASP does not have a medical specific set of resources. What they do have is they have all the best practices for application security. And many times our training is using the OWASP resources that you can use yourself. It's all open source. It's all free. It won't cost you a cent. It's all community-driven best practices that the biggest companies in the world support. Amazon's part of it, Microsoft, Oracle, IBM. So OWASP is your source of application security. So I'll share a link to it as a place you can go. You can get stuff from us as well. I'm doing a series of classes over the next couple of weeks, and I was back rereading it and was continuing to be impressed about the quality of what they're putting in there that tells the developer the basics of what they should do to build a secure mobile app. So the cookbook is there. Get your teams using it, right? It's all for free. So anyway, thanks for the time today, and I'll hang around.
Yeah. Okay. Hang around. I appreciate it, Brian. Appreciate it, Walt. Thank you so much.
Hey, Miguel, can I ask Brian one quick question?
Sure. Absolutely. Let's keep it.
Hey, Brian, so we can help you. Thank you for all the wisdom and guidance. Who are you looking for? How can we help funnel people to you? What's an ideal client? Because I'm constantly meeting medical device folks and building products. And secondly, given everything you spoke about, have you developed, or is there a maturity model for people that are launching a medical device to say, hey guys, you can't boil the ocean at one time. It's a moving target. The guidelines are getting stricter. But, like, hey, you mentioned somebody did not get funding because they didn't think about the security strategy effectively. Is there a maturity model of security in product development?
Yeah, so actually, OWASP is a source. There's something called SAM, SAMM, that's a software application security model. I'll add the SAM link in here. You can also get it through the OWASP link I just shared there. SAM is a way for an organization to overall build an application security program and establish models. If you're familiar with some other software development concepts like CMM, capability maturity model, CMM level 1, 2, 3 as a way to build professional software development. This is sort of the equivalent for security. So SAM lives on top of CMM, which now I've got all the gray hair to say in the 90s, CMM was the rage of how you built software development teams doing waterfall. So I was involved in a lot of that back then. So some of those recipe things I think are out there. There is some more legislation and stuff kicking around in the regulatory bodies that I think we'll see over time. Who knows the ability of that stuff to sort of come out. But a lot of this is just fundamental hygiene. There's some pieces that are specific to healthcare, but a lot of this is simply what data you're collecting, how you storing it, how are you transmitting it, how are you protecting it. And so any software developer who's like building a mobile app connecting to this stuff should know how to do those. And if not, they can do some micro training to learn how to do it.
Yeah. Thank you.
I saw one or two questions pass by that we may not have had a chance to answer. If you send an email to Miguel or to me, we'll make sure the answers get out to everybody who attended.
That's right. Yeah, we'll definitely make sure to circle back with all of you with the recording and also the tips and the links to AWASP, etc. So you'll all get a copy of this as well.